Welcome to another episode of the Unfuck Your Health podcast. We're going to go over how to maximize your gains efficiently and how to create results to help you look like you lift without spending hours and hours in the gym, because that's just not what most people want. And I'm someone who loves spending time in the gym, but for the regular person who just wants to look better, feel better, build muscle, get stronger, and feel confident at the beach, how do we actually get that without having to spend 5 or 6 days, 2 or 3 hours a day in the gym? How do we actually create those results? Can we create those results? Or are you missing out on a lot of potential gains? That's what we're going to go over today. But before we jump into that, a little, message. I'm going to be streaming this live podcast into the Facebook group. If you're not in the Fat Loss Forever Facebook group, go check that out. I'll be streaming this live into there. So you guys can watch this rather than listen to it. If you want to see my face, see how much my hands move. I talk about that all the time on my lives and how much I move my hands when I talk. I sometimes don't even realize it. And then when I talk about it, it gets really weird because then I notice it. But I'm going to put this in the Facebook group live so you guys can look at it and watch it rather than just have to listen to it. I'm also going to be posting them on YouTube if you want to check those out. Go ahead and follow that. I'm super excited to be able to be doing that. It's definitely interesting. It's weird just having the camera kind of recording on me right now while I'm talking. I'm used to just talking at my computer. But without further ado, we'll hop into the podcast. We won't waste too much of your time talking about how weird I am on camera. But again, today we're talking about how to maximize your gains efficiently, how to look like you lift without spending hours and hours in the gym. So before we really dive into it, I want to get a little bit nerdy. We're going to dive into the study by Schoenfeld and colleagues. It was a 2017 study on volume and how much volume you actually need to grow. So if you ask any trainer out there, any coach out there, how many sets per muscle group per week, the answer you're going to get 99% of the time is 10 to 20 sets per muscle group per week. So where did that actually come from? And it came from this Schoenfeld and colleagues 2017 study. And again, if you just, and I've been here, I've been the person who said this, and I still don't think it's a bad recommendation, but going back and rereading the study and talking to other people, I think that there's a lot more to it, and it's a lot more inclusive than we once thought, which is really, really cool. Because again, if you're the college kid on TikTok who can spend 3 hours in the gym, then doing that 20 set workout might be great for you. Probably not, but for the mom of 3 who works a 9-to-5 job, who has other responsibilities outside of the gym, but still wants to look good and feel confident at the beach, can we still make results as that person? And this study, when you actually look at it, shows that we can. So again, the 10 to 20 sets per muscle group per week came out of this study here. So they broke down 3 different groups. They had a 1 to 4 sets group, a 5 to 9 sets group, and a 10 plus set group. And a little caveat here, they did count indirect volume, which means that a bench press counted not only as chest, but it counted equally as delts and triceps. So when you count indirect volume, if you're doing a rowing motion, anytime you're hitting rows, you're also hitting biceps. So they counted all of that extra volume rather than just direct volume. I don't think indirect volume is a great indicator of muscular growth because you're not taking that muscle close enough to failure to actually elicit a growth response. So you're not necessarily, it's what we'd consider like junk volume. Not that it's necessarily bad, but it's not growth stimulating or hypertrophy stimulating. And if that's our goal, then we want to really focus on counting direct volume. And there's not a hit on this study. This is a fantastic study. The issue with doing exercise science studies is there's always going to be some sort of limitation to it. It's not going to apply to everyone, but this does give a deep insight into volume-induced growth. So they also counted every exercise as a 1-to-1. So they counted like a barbell squat or a leg press as a 1-to-1 to a leg extension. And for those of you who have ever done a barbell squat or a leg extension, you know that one set of squats is like 3 or 4 sets of leg extensions. They should not count equally, but again, limitation to the study, they do count equally. So what were the actual results of the study? Well, more than 10 sets got the best results. But where I think a lot of people miss or misunderstood or misread, and I did it first as well when I first started my fitness career, was the 5 to 9 sets group still got 84% of the results. And this is again still counting indirect volume. So if we're counting just direct volume, that's not very much work to still get 84% of the results. The 1 to 4 set group, again, counting indirect volume, so not very much work, got 64% of their overall results, which is really, really fucking cool. So what does this actually mean for us? It means that this is a lot more inclusive than we once thought. So you don't have to do 10 to 20 sets per muscle group per week, which for some people with a lot of responsibilities, trying to fit that in can be kind of daunting. And then it comes down to that all or nothing mindset. Well, if I can't go 5 times a week for 2 hours every single day, well, then I might as well just not go at all. And then you see those people feeling excluded because they can't do that because they have other priorities. And then again, they're having to choose those other priorities or health and fitness. But this is so much more inclusive now, which is really, really cool to see. So what this study shows is even at 1 to 4 sets, so if you did 4 sets of squats for the entire week, you could get 64% of the results you were ever going to get doing 10 or more sets for your quads. That is so inclusive for people, which is really, really cool to see. So that's us getting a little bit nerdy and kind of where this talk came from. This more like minimalist style approach of training, how to maximize our gains efficiently. We don't have to spend 2 to 3 hours a day in the gym or 5 or 6 times per week in the gym. And I see this on TikTok a lot, and it really bothers me. I spend too much time on TikTok sometimes, but it really bothers me where you'll see an influencer, someone with a large following, like, hey, do this workout, and then you start to count the volume, and it's like 20 sets per muscle group in that one workout, or even more than that. I saw one that had 20, I think it was like 24, 25 sets per muscle group in that specific workout. That was just one workout of the week. For someone who doesn't have much time, for someone who's just trying to get in and get out and be as efficient as possible, that's extremely daunting. And that's, again, where you see people fall victim to like, oh, if I can't do it, if I can't do all of that, I might as well just not do it at all because I'm not going to get the results I want to anyways, and just a fuck it mentality. So this whole podcast is showing like, no matter where you are in life, no matter if you are the college kid who has all the time in the world, or you're the mom of 3 with other responsibilities and a life and wants to have a social life, you can still get a significant amount of your results as long as you're smart with your training. And we're going to go over exactly how to do that. And if you're not seeing results, what are some things that we can actually look at to make sure you are seeing results, so you can look like you lift, so you can look good at the beach and feel confident when you're taking your clothes off. You can feel confident when you are just doing life and being a person. That is one of the best feelings in the world, is being able to be confident. So what we're going to focus on, and this came from Eric Helms. He's a fantastic researcher, super smart guy. He created what we call the training hierarchy. He has a training and nutrition hierarchy. He wrote books on them. Go check them out. They're great. But the training hierarchy is essentially a pyramid. I would show you my drawing of it, but it's just absolutely terrible. I'm horrible at art, horrible at drawing. It doesn't look good at all. So I'm going to save myself the embarrassment and not show the camera here. But this is essentially a pyramid, and the bottom of the pyramid, the base of the pyramid, is the most important part, all the way up to the top being the least important things that we need to focus on. So what do we actually need to do to create a plan? How do we, like when I get a client, what are the things that I focus on when I'm creating a training plan for them? How can you take this and make it work for your life? Again, the whole point of this podcast specifically is to help you create a plan that works for you in your life, so you can stop putting your puzzle pieces into other people's puzzle and wonder why it doesn't fit. Wonder why you can't get the results that you're looking for. So at the very base of this pyramid is consistency. I'm sure you're not surprised by that one if you ever listen to this podcast, but consistency is key. So what we have to do is ask ourselves the question, what is our floor? What is the least or the most amount that we could do on our absolute craziest week? What could we actually do if everything in our life went to shit? Could we go to the gym 2 or 3 times a week? Let's say we go to the gym 3 times a week. Awesome. That is our floor. You might on some weeks be able to go 4 or 5 times a week, but that's where we set ourselves up for failure rather than lowering the barrier of entry and making winning easy. is we set the bar too high to start. We set it 5 days a week, and then you might do that for a couple weeks until inevitably life gets crazy. Something gets thrown at you, and you're just like, fuck, I missed a day. Oh, and that day turns into 2, 3, a week, a month, and you haven't been in the gym in 6 months. You're like, what the fuck? But if you just lower the barrier of entry for success and realize again that you don't have to do so much work, you don't have to spend 2 hours in the gym 5 days a week to actually get results. It's a lot easier for you to say, yep, you know what, I'm going to start at 3 days a week. I'm going to create amazing results at 3 days a week. And you know what? If I can raise my floor and I want to go 4 days a week and I can consistently do that and I can set myself up for success, then I'm going to do that. But I'm going to start where winning is really fucking easy. We're going to start at 3 times a week. So once we find consistency, then we can get into kind of the meat and potatoes of the program. And this is going to be volume, intensity, and frequency. So we talked about volume in the Schoenfeld and colleagues 2017 study. So we know that volume is a lot less than we once previously thought, or that you can still get a significant amount of your results with lower volume approaches. So where we have to look at this is volume and intensity are kind of the most important parts here. Kind of think of these as dials. You can turn up the intensity dial and that's going to turn down the volume dial. You turn up the volume dial and you're going to turn down the intensity dial. Frequency is just essentially how you're going to split those up throughout the week. So for a 3 time a week approach, for example, kind of like we talked about, you could do an upper, lower, full body. You could do 3 full body days. You could do, if you had the goal to grow your lower body, you could do 2 lower bodies in a upper body day, or 2 lower body days and a full body day even. It really is going to depend on your specific goals and how you decide to toggle those volume and intensity dials. But frequency is just kind of how you're going to split it up throughout the week. How many times per week you're going to hit each muscle group. There are some studies that show that 2 times per week is better, but that doesn't mean that 1 time or 3 times a week you're going to get less results. It's just stimulating muscle protein synthesis multiple times per week. But again, 1 time per week isn't bad if you like to do a upper, lower, full body day where you're hitting some of your, if you want to grow your glutes and you spend a lot of time on that full body day hitting glutes or legs, but you still throw in a little bit upper body. But we'll go back to the volume and intensity dials. These are the 2 most important ones here. And where we look at when we're talking about how much volume do you actually need to see growth, it's not really volume that is the indicator. It's going to be intensity. Intensity is what we'll quantify as our proximity to failure, or reps in reserve is a good way to look at it. Reps in reserve is how many reps you haven't left until you hit failure. If you're training really, really, really hard and you hit failure, that is very, very intense training. So that means that volume toggle is going to go down and that intensity is turned all the way up. So the higher your intensity is, the less volume that you need to train with. So if you are someone who can only spend 30 to 60 minutes in the gym 3 days a week, you're going to have to turn that intensity dial up so you can turn that volume dial down. And that's okay. So instead of doing 3 sets of things or 4 sets of things, you could do 2 sets of Bulgarian split squats to failure or close to failure. I think a good range here is training with 0 to 2 RIR or reps in reserve. And I want to touch on reps in reserve a little bit. It's a fantastic way to quantify intensity, but until you actually train to failure, it's very, very hard to actually understand what failure is like. So I see this a lot with clients like, oh yeah, I'm training with 2 RIR. I'm like, I promise you, you've got at least 4 or 5 reps left in the tank. And when you first start out in training, a little caveat here, when you first start out in training, your proximity to failure that's needed to grow is a little bit less. You can get away with a little bit less intense training, but as you continue to grow through training, you're going to need to be a little bit more spot on with that RIR. So until you understand what failure actually is, it's going to be really hard to actually quantify it. So there is an essence of needing to touch failure to understand what 2 RIR actually is. But we could go into a whole nother discussion on RIR and failure and all that kind of stuff. And we'll touch on that a little bit more this podcast. But the biggest thing here is knowing that you do need to train really hard, or relatively hard at least, to lower that volume toggle. So the less volume that you want to train with, the less time you want to spend in the gym, the more intense your training is going to be. So again, just think of them as dials. As one goes up, the other one goes down. But you don't need to do these 20 sets of anything in a single workout. Hell, you don't even need to do 20 sets in a week of a single muscle group. That is just a ridiculous amount of volume. And again, something we'll touch on later is recovery, but that is just so hard to even recover from. Going up through this, now that we've dialed down, do we want to train with more volume or more intensity? And we know what our frequency is going to be. The next tier up in the hierarchy is going to be progressive overload. Progressive overload should relatively be built into your program, and you can build that into your program by dropping your RIR. So starting at a 3 RIR at week 1 and dropping to a 0 RIR in week 4. That is making sure that you are getting a little bit closer to failure every single week. You're progressively overloading. One of my favorite ways to do this is what I call a double progression. But again, before we get into that, progressive overload is essentially just making sure that you're doing a little bit more every single time you step in the gym. And it doesn't always have to be reps and weight. It could be more sets. It could be better tempo, better control, better, I hate the word, but mind-muscle connection. It could be so many other things inside of training. It doesn't always have to be reps and weight. Those are just really easy ones to say, hey, I did one more rep or I did a little bit more weight this time. You know you're continually going up. Your body is adapting. You have to continue to push it to that threshold. If you never increase and you just always go to the gym and you're always doing the 30 pound on the chest press, then it will start at a higher or a lower RIR. But as you get stronger, that is going to get further and further and further away from failure. Therefore, you're going to get less hypertrophy from it. But if you go in there and do more reps or more weight, you add tempo to it or whatever, you're going to get a little bit closer to failure. You're going to increase that a little bit and have some more progressive overload. But one of my favorite ways to do this is with the double progression. Essentially, double progression is you're not progressing one variable until you progress the other, those being reps and weight. In a lot of my programs, and in all of my programs except for powerlifting stuff, for the most part, I will give a rep range. So whether that's 10 to 15, 10 to 12, 8 to 10, 6 to 8, whatever the rep range is, you're not going to progress weight until you progress all the way through that rep range. So let's give an example here. If you do on dumbbell bench press 3 sets of 40 pounds for 6 reps and your rep range is 6 to 8, then next week your goal is 7 reps or 8 reps, and you're not going to progress to 45 pounds the next dumbbell up until you fill out that rep range and you hit all 3 sets of 40 at 8 reps. Then you can go up, and the idea is you'll go up to 45 pounds and drop back down to 6 reps, and you'll fill out that rep range, and you're continuing to go up either reps or weight every single week. Eventually, there will be a time where you need to be a little bit more structured with how you progress, and be a little bit more advanced with it. But for the majority of you listening to this, a double progression is a fantastic way to continue progress for a very, very long time. So making sure there's some sort of progressive overload built into your program. Number 4 on the hierarchy is going to be exercise selection. This is going to be very, very goal dependent, but we want to find something that's going to hit your goal. So if your goal is hypertrophy, then something that's going to help you induce hypertrophy. And this is where we can get into is a barbell squat good for hypertrophy? If you only have an hour to spend in the gym, I don't think a barbell squat is necessarily the best if your goal is strictly hypertrophy. Now, if your goal is strength or powerlifting or something, then obviously your exercise selection has to include the barbell squat, bench, and deadlift. But if your goal is not powerlifting, your goal is just hypertrophy or just functional training, again, I hate the word functional, but you know what I mean when I say functional training, is just to move better, feel better, look better, then we have to choose exercises that are going to accomplish that goal. So when you look at the program that you're doing, we need to make sure that those boxes are checked. Consistency, volume, intensity, progressive overload, exercise selection. Does that fit what your goal is? If yes, then great. If no, then let's change up our exercise selection. But we also need to find something that you enjoy, that you can consistently progress on, that fits your anatomy and biomechanics, that feels good for you. So exercise selection is going to become more and more individual the longer you start to train and realize what you like, what feels good, what doesn't feel good, if you are trying to grow your quads, but you're choosing exercises that you never feel your quads on, even if they might be quad focused exercises, well, they might not be the best quad focused exercises for you. Maybe we need to choose a different exercise that's going to hit that muscle in a different way that you're actually going to feel. Because if you're never getting sore from an exercise, well, chances are it might not be a great exercise for you. It might work for someone else, but it might not work for you. So we need to start to understand and just build awareness around those kind of things. But exercise selection has to be very, very goal dependent. The next thing on the list is going to be tempo. Tempo is something that I think is very underutilized in programming. Tempo, especially in the terms of hypertrophy, is something that is going to help you create more tension in the muscle, take it closer to failure, and create more hypertrophy. Mechanical tension is one of the main drivers of muscle hypertrophy. So the more mechanical tension you can get into that muscle, the more you're going to create muscular damage, the more you're going to force an adaptation. And then we can talk about spending time in lengthened positioned and lengthened induced hypertrophy, stuff like that. I won't dive into that right now. But I do think tempo is very, very underutilized, especially if your goal is to just look better, feel better, function better. I think controlling the weight through the rep range, going through a full range of motion is very, very important. But I think utilizing tempo is something that's very, very underrated, especially in the terms of hypertrophy. If you can control the eccentrics, if you can pause in the lengthened position, if you can do things like that, you're only going to increase your hypertrophic stimulus. And then the last thing on the hierarchy is going to be rest periods. Rest periods, I think, are not that important. As long as you're resting enough to give about 90% to your next set, then you're good to go. And they're going to be, again, very goal dependent. If you only have 30 minutes to spend in the gym, well, you're going to have less rest periods in between these sets. If you have an hour to spend, you might have a little bit more time. If you have 2 hours to spend, you can rest until you feel completely ready to go, and then you can give a full effort to that next set. Again, it's about how we can maximize gains efficiently, not get the most gains we could possibly ever get. That's not what this podcast is about. That is a whole nother podcast talking about how to maximize your gains versus maximize your gains efficiently. How can we spend the least amount of time doing the work to get the most out of it versus how can we get the most out of training? That's like training to be a bodybuilder versus training just to look good at the beach. The person who just wants to look good at the beach doesn't want to spend 5 or 6 hours at the gym. They want to spend 1 hour at the gym. The bodybuilder is cool spending 5 or 6 hours at the gym because they want to get the absolute most 100% out of their training. So different goals. Again, all this is very, very goal dependent. So now that we've gone through the hierarchy, another thing that we want to look at in your programming is, does it contain all of the fundamental movement patterns? If it contains all of the fundamental movement patterns, which is a squat movement, a hinge movement, so moving about the hips, a push, vertical and horizontal, a pull, vertical and horizontal, and some sort of ab work. Some people throw in rotation, which again is just going to fall under the ab category and that functionality. And then some people are going to throw in a carry, again, under that functionality. Grip strength is highly correlated somehow to longevity. But if you have consistency, if you've toggled volume and intensity to where it fits you in your life, if you have some sort of progressive overload built into your program, if you have an exercise selection that fits your goals, if you can throw in tempo and again, take into account your rest periods based off your goals and the time that you have allotted to you, and you have those fundamental movement patterns in there, you are well on your way to creating results very, very efficiently. Because again, you don't need these workouts to have 25, 30 sets per muscle group in a day, let alone a week. So again, it just makes things so much more inclusive when you don't have to think about, I have to do 10 exercises, I have to spend 2 hours in the gym today. You can spend 30 minutes in the gym, 60 minutes in the gym, and still get a significant portion of the results that you were ever going to get if you spend an extra hour or 2 in the gym every single day. And you're only doing this 2 or 3 times a week, people. You can give 2 to 3 times a week to feel your best, to look your best, to feel confident. So now that we've talked about the things that you need to do to look at in your program to make sure that it is going to maximize your efficiency and actually work for you in your life, if you're not seeing results, what are things that we can do to make you look like you actually lift? Number one, and I think this one is extremely underrated, and I don't think that enough people consider it, is eat more fucking food. We have to stop dieting all the time. When you're constantly dieting, it's going to be very, very hard for you to actually put on muscle mass. Building muscle is a very metabolically active process, so we have to actually eat more food to dedicate to building muscle. We can't build muscle out of thin air. We have to have some calories dedicated to actually building that muscle. If you do not have those calories, it's going to be very hard, virtually impossible for you to efficiently put on muscle mass. And I think one of the most underrated things on your fitness journey to change your physique is actually spend time building muscle. If you add 10 pounds of muscle to your current frame, you are going to look very different. You are going to look more quote unquote toned. You're going to feel better. You're going to function better. You're going to look better. But so many people, it's always about get smaller, 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 but they never spend time to put that muscle mass on. So they never get the body they look for, and they're always chasing that. And it's because they're constantly dieting, or they're never fueling their body enough to actually grow. Number two is going to be eat at least 1 gram per pound of body weight in protein every single day. I would even say that if you're very serious about maximizing your results in the gym, with the least amount of time given to it, I would say probably even more than 1 gram per pound of body weight. You can eat 1.2 to 1.5 grams per pound of body weight of protein. Again, lean body mass, not body weight. For 300 pounds, I don't want you eating 450 grams of protein. I think that's what the math would come out to be. But whatever, math's not my strong suit. But of lean body weight, 1.2 to 1.5 grams per pound of body weight, but at least a minimum of 1 gram per pound of body weight every single day to maximize your results in the gym of protein. Number three, we talked about this a lot already, is train fucking harder. If you are never touching failure, and I'm not telling you that you always have to train every single rep, every single set to failure, but if you're never touching failure, if you're never getting to that point, if you're never pushing the muscle that hard, you are leaving a lot of gains on the table. A lot of results are not being had because you're not training hard enough. And it gets uncomfortable to train that hard. And it takes a skill. Training that hard is something you have to work for. It's a skill that you have to practice, but training that hard will elicit results. Again, the harder you train, the harder you turn that dial up for intensity, the more you can turn that volume or that dial down for volume, the less volume you actually have to do. Now, if you're someone that just doesn't want to train very hard, you can turn that volume up and you're going to get some results. But again, the main driver of muscle hypertrophy is going to be your proximity to failure or your intensity. It's how hard or how far you can push that muscle to force it to actually adapt that's going to grow. So if you're struggling to see results, you need to train harder. Number four is focusing on sleep and recovery. We don't grow while we're in the gym. We grow outside of the gym. So if you're struggling to see results in the gym, we need to look at how you're actually recovering. So the way this works is the stress recovery adaptation model of growth. So what that looks like is we stress the muscle, we go to the gym, we apply a stimulus to it, we then go home, we eat, sleep, recover. If the stimulus was enough, if we trained hard enough, and the recovery was good enough, if we slept enough, we ate enough, we recovered well enough, then we're going to force an adaptation. Stress, recovery, adaptation. But if we're lacking on the stress side, and we're lacking on the or the recovery side, we're not going to grow. Say that one more time. If we're lacking on the stress side, if we're not stressing that muscle, if we're not forcing that muscle to grow enough, if we're not recovering well enough, eating, sleeping, recovering, then that muscle's not going to grow. So we need to focus on sleep and recovery. Because again, we don't grow in the gym, we grow outside of the gym. We grow as we recover. Think of your recovery days, your days off from the gym as growth days rather than days off the gym, because that's when you actually see the growth that you work so hard for in the gym. Number 5 is exercise selection and movement quality. So we kind of talked about this a little bit in the hierarchy. Exercise selection, very goal dependent. If your goal is to look better, to have hypertrophy, to grow your muscles, then we need to pick exercises that are going to elicit that response. If you are picking movements with high levels of instability, if you're picking movements that you can't progressively overload well, if you're picking movements that just don't have a great hypertrophic stimulus, or exercises that have a very high systemic fatigue cost that associate with it, like a barbell deadlift is not a great hypertrophy exercise because it has so much fatigue that's built up with it. It's going to be hard to recover from, and systemic fatigue is very hard to recover from, where local fatigue is like a leg extension, like a single joint movement, is much easier to recover from. And the other part of this is movement quality. So again, this is a skill that we have to develop, but the better and more efficiently we're able to go through these movements, the better our exercise selection is, the more efficient we're going to be in our hypertrophy gains. But again, these are both skills, and these both take awareness and building through with your training age. But exercise selection, we want to pick things with high degrees of stability that fit you and your body, that feel good, that you can actually feel the muscle working. And the movement quality is going to be a skill that you have to build through years of training. But adding the tempo in with that is going to improve your movement quality, because the weight is not controlling you now, you're controlling the weight. That's why I think tempo is such an important part of hypertrophy. And number 6 is going to be not following a structured program. So we talked about the hierarchy of training. That is what the basis of a structured program looks like. It has volume, intensity, frequency, progressive overload, exercise selection, tempo, and rest already built into it. It's got those forms of progressive overload built into it. You're going in the gym and you're doing the same things over and over again, and you're constantly doing a little bit more reps, more weight, better control, better tempo. You're progressing those movements. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make is program hopping or going to the gym and doing whatever the hell they want. You're never actually able to grow that muscle. Again, go back to movement quality, and number 5 here. You're going to build movement quality through doing the same movements over and over and over again. If you want to maximize your results very efficiently, you're going to get comfortable doing the same array of movements over and over and over again, and continually trying to progress them. So those are the 6 things that we'll take a look at if you're not seeing results. There's obviously a lot more. Those are 6 I came up with that I think cover the most people. Everyone's under the umbrella for these 6 for the most part. When you're struggling to see results, look like you lift, and actually feel like you're getting something out of your training. And that is how you maximize your gains efficiently. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Any specific questions on your program, feel free to reach out. Feel free to send me your program as well. And I posted in my Facebook group that I was going to do a Q&A at the end of this and answer a few questions about training for people. So we'll dive into that now. So Megan asked, I've been working upper body one day and lower body the next. I missed yesterday due to life and wondered if I should just do both days today to make up for what I wasn't able to do yesterday. I asked her if she was following a structured program. She said no, and that she was just going in and doing an upper body day and a lower body day on Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday. So with this, I would say, number 1 is get on a structured program. So you, again, kind of what we just talked about, you're making sure that you're progressively overloading. Otherwise, you're leaving a lot of potential results on the table. But I would say that if you miss a day in your program, just do it the next day. And that's where I think finding your floor and starting with that low level, that lower barrier of entry is super, super important. Because if you're going to miss a day, and it's something that's going to happen consistently, let's just drop down a day. But if it's just like a one-off thing, just do that workout the next time you're going to be in the gym. It might throw your schedule off a little bit, but it's better than just missing that volume altogether. So I'd say number one, get on a program, follow something with some structured progressive overload built into it. Number two, just jump right back in and do the next workout that you were supposed to do. Perry Ann asked, proper stretching for heavy workouts and for easy walking. I think stretching is extremely overrated. Most of the time, the best warm-up you can do is get in and do the movement that you're about to do at a lighter weight than you're going to do it. So if you're going to go in and do like a barbell squat, and you're going to work up to something heavy, you don't need to spend 30 minutes stretching beforehand to go in and do that movement. What you need to do is go get those joints warm that you're going to use. So doing like 5 or 10 minutes on a piece of cardio to just warm your body temperature up, warm your joints up, and then go and do some squats, some body weight squats, some squats with the bar, some squats with some light weight, and just build your way up to that top set. But doing the movement is going to be the best thing. I think stretching is extremely overrated, like I said. Most people's go-to if something is wrong is like just stretch it out more. And for the most part, that's not true. I find that a lot of times it's not something that needs to be stretched, it's something that needs to be strengthened. As far as walking, or for an easy walk, again, I think stretching is overrated. Get out there and start walking. Get out there and get your body warm, and you're going to feel better. And we had one last question from Becky. What is the ideal morning routine that includes a 30-minute at-home workout? I used to really buy into the whole morning routine thing and think that you really need this morning routine to get up and get going. But in all honesty, the best morning routine is get up and just get going. So my morning routine is generally get up, drink some water, start my coffee, and then try to get into work. I eat breakfast because I'm always hungry right when I wake up. But in all honesty, if you get in there and you have, you want to get in a 30-minute at-home workout, the best thing to do is get up, drink some water real quick, because a lot of times we wake up dehydrated, and that's why you wake up and you're feeling tired. But get up, drink the water, go to the bathroom, do whatever you need to do to get ready, and then just jump into the workout as quick as you can, and just start moving. You're going to feel really good. You're going to get the workout over. You don't need this big, elaborate morning routine. It's not going to make you any more successful. If anything, I find for a lot of people, it's an excuse to not get started with the day. Alex Hormozy is a very smart guy, very successful business guy. And his morning routine is literally get up and get to work as soon as I possibly can. So I don't waste the morning just trying to like do all this extra stuff to get me prepared for the day. That's kind of the morning routine I like to buy into, is like, I'm just going to get up and get moving as quick as I can, get things going. If you have like a 5 or 10 minute routine that you really enjoy doing, like get up, read 10 pages of a book and drink some water, or just drink your coffee, then great, do that morning routine. But the best thing to do, especially if you only have 30 minutes in the morning to work out, is just get up and get into that workout as soon as possible. Hope that answers your guys' questions. Those are the only 3 we had. Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Unfuck Your Health podcast.